Hi, this is Vanessa Gorman, and I'm continuing this lesson about Greek adjectives by talking about comparison and also the superlative forms. So the comparative and superlative forms of Greek adjectives. What does that mean? Well, adjectives and also adverbs have something called degree, which is to say the positive, which is our normal form. So for an adjective, something like fast or high or hostile or friendly. Or comparative, faster, higher, more hostile. So if you have two entities together, one is higher than the other, one is more hostile than the other, one is more friendly than the other. So that is the comparative form. And then if you have more than two, we talk about the superlative, which is translated in various ways as either most or in the EST form, if there's three of you and he is the fastest of the three, he's faster than me, but he's the fastest of us all. So it's most hostile. The ES form, you can say very, just like for comparative, you can just say more. So we have positive, comparative, and superlative of adjectives and adverbs. When you get a form of an adjective, it's usually just the positive. Um, for most regular adjectives, plain old three ending adjectives, um, you form the comparative by just taking the stem and adding teros, tera, teron. So fulos becomes fuloteros. Notice that the stem vowel lengthened out there too. Polemioteros, proteros. You've actually seen proteros before, and husteros. You've seen them in the adverbial accusative forms, proteron and husteron, that occur so often that some people list them actually as separate adverbs. It's not hard to spot. It's got that ter in it, the same as we have in the comparatives. They decline like plain old three ending adjectives. They're pretty easy. Likewise, superlatives do the same thing. They just add tatos, tate, taton to the stem. So you get philotatos. So anytime you see the tatos, you know you've got a superlative. So it's very straightforward for the majority of adjectives. The neuter singular is often used as the adverb instead of trying to make an adverbial form out of it. We've seen this all so many times. Like I say, husteron is an example of this. The neuter plural is usually what they use for the superlatives for some reason. They just like to make it plural. But if you see a neuter plural sitting out there that's in the superlative, you'll know to take it adverbially most hostilely. So let's look at a few of these. The Lacedaemonion kai presbyteroi kai neoteroi euthus afficonto. So you see right away teroi, teroi. So you know those are comparatives. And you know the word presbus means old man. So the older men, right? It's in the nominative. Go to your verb afficonto, arrived. Euthus, you know already, means immediately. So what do we do with the rest of the sentence? Lacedaemonion is in the genitive. So we're going to say older men made up of the Lacedaemonians. So the older of the Lacedaemonian men. That's usually just treated as a plain old attribute. So the older ones. Kai neoteroi. Well, you haven't seen this form, but you know it's a comparative. You know it's a masculine nominative plural. And the word neos, if you look it up, means new, right? As in a neophyte, right? Anything neoclassical means new. So it means younger in this case. So the older men and the younger men of the Lacedaemonians arrived immediately. Now, Lacedaemonians is an attribute of both of these, so I've hung it on the chi to indicate that it's the older men and younger men of the Lacedaemonians. But it's very straightforward. You see that teros, and you know exactly what's going on. Likewise, we've seen words, phrases like this plenty of times. Hoiden Lacedaemonioi, proteron, upolo chrono, lusandron, ex epempson nauarchon. We've seen this before, haven't we? We saw this just a little while ago. The Lacedaemonians sent Lysander as an hourarch. We saw that sentence just in the last video. They sent him proteron before, right? Just the comparative form from first, actually. And then we have this dative in there, ou polo chrono. What do you expect with a comparative? Degree of difference. So, not long before by not much time. See how you get this dative of degree difference? Earlier by not much time. The Lacedaemonians sent Lysander as an hourarch. Okay? So those are very straightforward. However, as usual, the most common ones are irregular, like Polus, which is so very common, has pleon and pleistos. Megas has mexon and megistos. You see megistos a lot, especially in the neuter accusative megista, greatest of all, right, as an adverb. Kakon gets kakion and kakistos. Frankly, most of these you don't see that much in the comparative, except pleos, because more comes naturally. Many, more, most. So more we see quite often. Great, greater, greatest. You don't see maidzone very often. You don't see worse very often. But the worst of all, hekistos, or akistos, the least of all. It actually comes from a different root. Agathos often shifts to this different root, beltion. And aristos we've already seen, best, right? The best. So good, better, best, which also becomes beltistos sometimes. Kalos, beautiful, kalion, kalistos. So the istos ending is like the tatos ending. So that's pretty recognizable. And you see a lot of these irregulars seem to have this same ion ending in the comparative. Ekthron, ekthion, ekthistos. Again, we lost the row in there. And all of these, as you can see, the superlatives all look fine. Once you know what they mean, they're all regular 3 declension adjectives. So kratistos is on your list. It shows up very often. It's the superlative of the adjective kratos, which means strong or mighty. You don't see that very often, but you see kratistos a lot. Strongest meaning best. So, for example, kai euthus hege satotein suntomotatein epitakratistates chores. Now, let's sort this out. We've got our verb early on, hege sato, right? And we know that means he led, hege omai. Deponent, see the sigma, so it's the sign of the aorist, so it knows he led. Kai euthus should be no problem by now. And immediately he led. Now, we don't have any express subject here. There's nothing in the nominative. So you just go with he. We're fine. Now, he led tain sunto motatain. You don't know that word, right? Totally new word to you. But you see the tatain and you know it's a superlative. Okay? Leave it alone for now. Epitacratista. Aha, you know that's superlative too, right? Because we just saw it. It means the best or the mightiest. Tes choros, you know from long ago, first conjugate or first declension noun of the land. You see this is neuter plural accusative. Into ta kratisto. So it's into the best parts of the land. So immediately he led them into the best parts of the land. So what do you do with this tain sunto matatain? Well, if you look it up, you'll see it means shortest. So the root word means short. The superlative means shortest. You lead someone along a road. Okay, so he led the shortest route to the best parts of the land, quite literally. We would just say to the best land. But it's to the best parts of the land. We've got to explain what the best parts are of, right? So immediately he led them along the routes to the best parts of the land. All right. There are, of course, these odd comparatives that you saw that all ended with on or eon, and they're simply third declension forms. And so once you start looking for third declension endings, they're not going to bother you. The most common of these is elason, which means fewer or less. The actual word that it is a comparative of is so rare, it almost never occurs, but it, like many common words, serves as a comparative form for mikros, meaning small, right? Microscope. So it just means less or fewer. And all of these other irregulars decline the same way as a third declension adjective, with same forms in masculine and feminine, and the neuter varying in the nominative and accusative. So now we've already seen these three adverbs. I gave them to you in the chapter on adverbs because they're so very common. And in fact, this is the positive, comparative, and superlative degrees of the same word, mala, very. So mala, very, an adverb in the positive, malone, more, and malista, especially. Now let's talk about how we do comparisons. We've already seen dative of degree difference. We see this all the time. Taller by a foot. Whatever you want to compare it is thrown in the dative. Likewise, you can have a genitive of comparison. Taller than him, right? Taller of him. We don't quite say that in English, but than. You can also use the word a. A is the same word as or, by the way. If you say either or, it's a. But it also can mean than, as in the comparative. The thing being compared then is put in the same case as that to which it's being compared. It can also be used with entire clauses, right? I'll give you an example in just a second. The other thing you can say is malone or malone a, more than, right? So it functions pretty much like English. And it's not unusual to see comparisons strengthened by much, much more than, right? More by much. It's just using this adverbial accusative. So superlatives, you often get them with the partitive genitive. One of the men, the most of the men. Here's most of the men. Or hos superlative is as blank as possible. So let me remind you that we had the hos earlier in the adverb chapter, but I said it varies by context, right? In this case, you can hang it on a number, if you'll recall, to mean roughly a number. Well, here you can hang it on a superlative to mean as great as possible, as in this case, prothumos tatos. Tatos, you know, means superlative. Prothumos is not a word you have, but it means to have thumos. Thumos is heart or courage. So Cyrus was, toward the war, hos prothumotatos. He was as eager as possible toward the war. All right, so let's look at some of these. So to strateuma polemioteron. So the army was polemioteron. We see that's a comparative, and we know it means warlike. So more warlike, polu, by much. So we would just say they were much more warlike. The expedition was much more warlike, or the army, depending on the context. Sunistasan kai tas megistas poles pros alelos. Okay, so sunhistemi means to set up. It can mean to join together or combine. And here that's the meaning we're going to want. But he set up tas megistas poleos. The cities. Which cities? That's one of these irregular superlatives. From megas. Megas means big or great. Megistas, the biggest cities. The greatest cities. Pros alelos, toward each other. So what do you do with the chi? The chi is not actually an aux. Why? Because it's not at the beginning of the sentence. Instead, this is going to be one of these chi also or even that stresses the words next to it. So in this case, I took it as they combined even the greatest cities together with each other, not just the little cities, but even the greatest cities. And then Kai becomes an aux on even the greatest, the word it's emphasizing. Hygar trieres ton athenaion polo pleus esan. So were, we see at the very end, and we see at the beginning our nominative, the triremes were. That's our basic sense, the triremes were. Ton athenaion, obviously a genitive of the Athenians, or of Athens, but yeah, of the Athenians. No, can't be of Athens because the I in there. Polo pleus esan. Well, Pleios can be a lot of forms, but it can be the accusative, but it also can be the nominative. So here we're looking for a nominative. The triremes were many. Not just many, more, right? Many would be polos, poli. Um, in this case, we have the comparative form more, and then we have a dative next to it, dative of degree difference by much. So literally, the triremes of the Athenians were more by many. We could just say the Athenians had many more triremes, right? You can shift the sentence around completely to make it into good English. If you take the same sentence and substitute in malista, most of all, how do you translate that? The triremes of the Athenians were more, especially. They were especially numerous, we could say, is a good English translation of what's going on there. Malista stresses that word so much. Okay, the Lacedaemonians, Pasai Politei, Malon A, okay, we see Malon A, Demokratia, Episteuson. We don't have the word episteuson, but if you look at it, you see the augment, you see the sigma, you see the son ending, you know it's they, third person plural, aorist. Now, pisteuo, if you look it up, we've seen pistos, which means to trust. Pisteuo is just the verb that means to trust, right? So the Lacedaemonians trusted. You trust something in the dative. A lot of verbs necessarily take a dative argument. So the object is going to be in the dative. And what do we have in the dative? We have a politeia. That iota subscript gives it away. But it's not just any politeia. It is passe. It's not all politeia. It's not the entire politeia. It's every politeia in this context because they trust every politeia, every government system, malone a demokratia, more than you have to supply, they trust democracy. So the Lacedaemonians trusted every government system. There's your object. More is an adverb. Then we get this auxi, which is introducing actually a clause because you have to resupply the verb to make it make sense. So then they trust democracy. Okay? And democracy is the object of the supplied verb. Likewise, here's another one that is similar. Apektainen pleus Athenaion en octo mesin e pantes Peloponnesioi deca ete. Okay, they killed, right up front. They killed Pleos Athenaion, more of the Athenians. Okay, we're used to that. That's a partitive genitive. That's no problem. They killed more of the Athenians en octo mesin. Time when? In 8 months. So far, we're fine. Then we have this a stuck in there. It could mean or, but we don't have another verb or anything contrasting with it. And usually when it means or, we'll have an an either or. The fact that we have a comparative early in the sentence, plios, tells you that you're expecting a comparison. So more than. So in the tree, you see they killed more of the Athenians than. Then we have another nominative and another time reference, and you have to grab the verb from the first half of the sentence. More than Pantes Peloponnesioi, all of the Peloponnesians killed, supply the verb, in 10 years. So accusative of duration of time in this case. So they killed more Athenians in 8 months than all the Peloponnesians killed in 10 years. Okay? So comparative and superlative isn't terribly difficult as a whole. You just have to expect certain constructions with them. You've got to expect a dative of degree difference. You've got to expect genitives of comparisons. You've got to expect malone or polo or malone a or something like that. They will often occur with them. So this just becomes something you see regularly. And especially most of these occur as adverbs more than anything else. You don't get that many adjectives acting truly attributively. So this should give you a good leg up and on the sentences that are set for this chapter.